I'm typing this with my left thumb because my other hand is wrapped so thick it looks like a winter mitten. If you've ever crawled into a cave you shouldn't have, you already know the first lie you tell yourself is that you're doing it safely. We weren't doing it safely, but we were just careful enough to feel responsible. Helmets, two headlamps each. Mine was a black diamond spot that still had the price sticker on the battery door because I'm lazy. Both of us even had a tiny backup light in a pocket, a cheap rope, and a first aid kit the size of a paperback that made us feel like we were grown up. This was all my idea. That part matters. We heard about the cave the usual way. Somebody's cousin knew somebody who used to go in there all the time. And location was given to us like a dare, not like directions. A pull off a no sign, a thin trail that looked like deer made it, then a hole in limestone that you could miss if you weren't looking for it. No gate, no post signs, nothing that said keep out. We told ourselves that this meant it was fine. We parked in a gravel patch that had room for maybe two cars, the kind of place where the weeds are taller than your bumper, and there's always a crushed soda can and a beer bottle in the brush. No trailhead map, no register box, just trees and quiet. We did that thing where you stand at the entrance and kill your lights for a minute so your eyes would stop fighting the dark. And that's when we heard it. Breathing. Not a drip. It wasn't water moving. It wasn't a bat fluttering. It sounded like someone breathing through their nose. Slow, calm. Like they were asleep just inside the entrance. My friend clicked his light on and swept the entrance. The beam etching wet stones and pale dust. Nothing else. Air moving, he whispered, as if the cave cared. I nodded because I wanted it to be the air. We turned our lights off again and listened. But the breathing had stopped, and that should have been enough. That should have been a warning to leave. Instead, I laughed, the kind of dumb laugh you do when you're trying to make your body unclench, and I said, okay, weird. Let's go. The cave swallowed light in a way that didn't feel normal. It wasn't just dark, it felt absorbent, like your beam of light hit the walls and didn't bounce back the way it should. The entrance narrowed fast, faster than I expected, forcing us to duck, then crouch, then move in a half walk, half squat that made our thighs burn. The floor shifted from gritty rock to mud that grabbed your boots and made little sucking sounds every time you lifted your feet. For a while, the air stopped smelling like outside. No leaves, no cold breeze, nothing. Just stone and damp. We dropped through a squeeze into a wider chamber and stood up like we had earned it, like we achieved something. Luckily, it was big enough to stand comfortably, with a dark passage on the far side that looked like a throat. That's when the smell hit us. It wasn't cave smell, it wasn't the smell of damp mineral. It was sweet and sour at the same time, like old meat left in a freezer after the power went out. It stuck to the back of my tongue, it burned my throat, it made me want to swallow, even though swallowing didn't help. My friend covered his nose with his sleeve. I don't like that. I didn't answer right away because I was listening for the cave rhythm. Every cave had one. Drips of distant water, little ticks, a little constant background noise that keeps you from noticing how quiet it really is. This chamber had none of that. Then, from somewhere in that far passage, we heard a soft scrape. Not loud, not suddenly, just the sound of something being pulled across rock. I snapped my light toward the passage, the beam shaking because my hand was already starting to tremble. Nothing. Just stone. The scraping sound happened again, closer this time, low to the ground. My friend took a step back and his boots skidded in the mud. Turn around. We had a rule. That says if either of us wanted to turn around, we turn around. No arguing, no ego. I broke that rule by taking one stupid step toward the far passage, like getting closer would turn my fear and curiosity. The scraping stopped, and silence pressed in on us. Then came a small, wet click, like a tongue against teeth, like someone trying to imitate a sound they'd heard a human make. My friend didn't whisper this time. We're leaving. We turned. But the squeeze we came through, it looked different on this side. It tends to happen when you're underground. Your brain files the shape away wrong, then hands it back to you like a bad memory. My friend went first because he's smaller. I followed close behind, flattening myself into the gap. My helmet scraped stone. My breath was loud in my own ears. My headlamp beam jittered across stone, inches from my face. We were halfway through when something touched my ankle. It wasn't a brush, it wasn't a bump. Something gripped my ankle with cold, dry pressure like fingers, but too long, too many points of contact. I kicked hard. My boot hit something that felt like knotted cord stretched over bone, and the grip tightened. I yelled my friend's name, and the sound ricocheted off the cave walls until it turned into pure noise, pure panic. My friend's boots scuffed faster ahead of me. Go! He shouted. Go! Go! Thing on my leg yanked. I slid backward an inch that in that squeeze, that tight squeeze felt like a mile. I twisted and kicked again. The grip slid higher past my boot, against my calf, and I felt a sharp sting, then warmth running down my leg. It was cutting me, not with a blade, with something rough and hard dragging across my skin. One of my hands came free, and I reached back blindly to grab at something, anything, at whatever I could. My fingers hit hair, thin hair, wet with cave moisture, stuck to something that felt like skin stretched too tight. I jerked my hand away, and it came back with a few pale strands stuck to my glove. Panic hit like a light switch flipping. I surged forward with everything I had, my helmet banging rock hard enough to spark my vision, shoulders scraping, hips catching on rock, ribs grinding against stone. The grip slipped, caught, and then was torn away. When I burst out of that squeeze, I slammed onto my hands and knees in the mud and sucked air like it was my first breath. My friend grabbed the strap of my pack and yanked me upright. Don't look, he said. I looked anyway. My headlamp beam swung back to the squeeze. At first, there was nothing. Then something pressed into the gap from inside, not coming out, just pushing forward like it was testing the space. Pale skin, not white, nose, more the color of old fat. The surface looked wet but didn't drip. A mouth, it was wide, too wide, packed with small teeth. They weren't predator teeth, more like someone crammed too many human teeth into one place. There were no eyes that I could see, just smooth skin catching the edge of my light. And it made that wet click again and breathed in through something that might have been a nose, the same breathing we'd heard at the entrance. My friend yanked me away so hard my neck snapped back, and we ran. My leg throbbed, and every step sent a bright pulse up my calf. Warm wetness soaked my sock. Behind us, the scrape followed, sometimes close, sometimes far, but never gone. We hit another low squeeze and dropped to our bellies. The scrape behind us, it changed. It became faster. It became a shuffle, like something had decided. Something hit the back of my boot, then my injured calf. Texture cut through my pants. Hard ridges under thin skin. It didn't feel like a muscle. It felt like something that shouldn't bend, but it was bending anyway. I kicked back on instinct, and my heel landed against something that felt like a jaw, and it clamped down. It wasn't a deep bite, it was a hold, teeth pressing through fabric into skin, enough to flash my vision white. And I screamed an ugly, honest noise. My friend reached back, grabbed my wrist, and pulled like he was trying to rip me out of the cave by force. The stone scraped my ribs, my helmet snagged, my bad leg flared, and I tasted metal in my mouth. Then my boot tore free with a wet rip, and I slid forward, dragging my leg through the narrow space while something behind me clicked and scraped at rock like it was frustrated. We burst out into a sloping tunnel that led towards the main entrance. Fresher air hit my face in faint cold waves, and it was the best thing I have ever felt in my life. We didn't stop until we hit the first chamber, the one marked with old graffiti and muddy footprints from other people who turned around where we didn't. That gray smear, that beautiful smear of daylight was visible ahead of us, and for 1 second, I thought it was over. And the breathing started again. Louder now, but with something extra in it. A faint tremor like excitement. My friend kept a hand on my pack and pushed me forward. We hit the mouth of the cave and spilled into the trees and the normal world. I fell onto leaves and dirt and lay there gulping air that suddenly felt thin, too thin. My friend stood a few feet away, staring at the entrance like he expected it to follow us. And from my position on the ground, I stared too. The darkness inside did not move, but right at the edge where stone met daylight, something shifted, just enough for us to know it was there. A pale curve, the suggestion of a head leaning forward, as if it was testing the light. And then, just inside the mouth, made a sound that was almost a word. It was my friend's voice, but flattened and wrong, like somebody wearing it like a disguise. Leaving. My friend grabbed my arm and hauled me up. We half walked, half staggered back to the car. I don't remember the trees. I don't remember the deer trail. I just remember the way my own breathing sounded too loud, breaking the silence of the trees. At the gravel pull-off, my friend sat me on the bumper and peeled my pant leg up. 3 long cuts ran down my calf where it had grabbed me at first, like I'd been raked by rough stone. Below that, a crescent of shallow punctures where I'd clamped. Too many punctures, too evenly spaced. It was unlike any animal bite I've ever seen. He poured water from a plastic bottle over the cuts. The water ran pink, then bright red, then clear. We drove in silence, and soon enough, I told my version of the truth under the fluorescent lights of a doctor's office. I said I slipped in a tight spot. I said my leg hit rock. I said it was my fault. The nurse didn't look impressed. She cleaned the wounds, asked if my tetanus shot was up to date, and said, "You're lucky it wasn't worse." The same tone of voice you'd use for someone who burned their hand on a stove. They stitched what needed stitches, wrapped what needed wrapping, and sent me home with instructions that had nothing to do with caves. I tried to be normal about it. I showered. I threw my clothes into the hot washer. I scrubbed the mud out of my one remaining boot with an old toothbrush until the bristles bent. As I was cleaning the tread, I found a thin strand of pale hair stuck in the grooves. It was almost clear, like fishing line until you hold it to the light. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my friend's. I flushed it immediately because I didn't want that thing in my house. Last night, I woke up after 2 a.m. because I heard something. Not footsteps, not a voice, and not a movie sound through a wall. It was breathing, slow and calm through a nose coming from somewhere in the darkness of my home. I laid there, holding my breath and listening, waiting for it to stop the way it did the cave entrance. But it didn't. It kept going, steady and quiet, like it was trying to match my rhythm. I tried to be rational. The houses make noises, vents breathe, pipes tick. The brain does weird things when it's been scared. Then I heard a small, wet click. It could have been anything. The heater, a settling sound, my imagination snapping to a familiar pattern. I sat in my bed and I didn't move for a long, long time. This morning, when I got up, I found my boot by the door where I left it to dry. But its twin, the one I lost, the one taken from me in the cave, was sat next to it, as if nothing was wrong. I did not put that there. That's the only tangible thing I have other than stitches and scars, and it's almost nothing. I feel as if I am losing my mind. But it's not proof. It's just wrong. So, I'm writing this to tell you that if you're the kind of person who thinks you can go underground and come back out unchanged, you aren't. Don't do it. Because I'm sitting here with my leg wrapped, trying to convince myself that I am safe, and I keep catching myself going quiet in my own home. Like, silence is a trick that might keep me alive. And the worst part is, I'm not sure anymore if something followed us, or if it only learned enough from us well enough to live in the darkness in the back of my head, breathing and watching me.